Okay, so let's do our activity. In this activity, we're going to make a paper pyramid. One side is going to be open and the other sides will be covered in tissue paper. So to start out, we'll build a little pyramid out of skewers. We'll tape it together and then we will glue paper to it. So to start off, we're going to need 6 pieces of skewer. And I'm going to make this one smaller than I normally would because I want to be able to zoom in so that you can really see what I'm doing. So I'm going to cut these skewers in half. For your pyramid, it can be any size. As long as all your skewers are the same size, that's awesome. So I'm going to cut off the end of these skewers. So I'm making a mark at 9.5, and then I just use my calculator because sometimes I get frustrated with math, and often some of my students do as well. So I thought I'd just make that clear that you can use your calculator. So if this is 9.5 inches, I want to cut this in half. 9.5 inches divided by 2 equals 4.75. So that gives me the exact measurement to cut these in half. And 4.75, 4, and 7/5 is 3/4. So there we go. Okay. So I've got these measured so that I'll be able to cut them right in half. And the way I cut these in half is to hold the skewer, and I'm holding my X-Acto knife. Oh, and that one snapped right off. That made it easy. If your X-Acto knife is nice and sharp, then this is super easy. So I'm holding one end and I'm twisting it. And if your X-Acto knife is super sharp, then this makes things very easy, but it might not be. You might be able to just score it and snap it off, okay? So, same thing here. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So I'm just twisting the skewer, and then sometimes a little part like this might be hard to snap off with your fingers. So one little trick you can use is to take your ruler and just hold it tight and snap it off like that. Oh, I sure didn't score that very much, did I? Sometimes you get some little fiddly bits at the end, and you can just cut those off. Some people's scissors might just cut right through. The scissors that I have just don't want to do that. So I'm going to continue with this method. Whatever method you use, as long as it does the job, is fine with me. This method works very well for me, so it's the one I'm sticking with. If you have some needle nose pliers or something like that, then you can use that, but obviously I didn't put everything in the kit. So here's some needle nose pliers that can also help just snap the end off, okay? If you are using your scissors and your scissors are sharp enough and you snap something off, just make sure it doesn't fly into the eye of somebody near you or into your own eye. Okay, so then I'm snapping this one. And so now I've got 6 pieces. Okay, so there are lots of different connections that we can use, and basically we're going to be taping this together, okay? And just knowing a few simple ways to connect the skewers to each other is going to really, really help you out. So, I like to set up a bunch of tape before I get going. So I'm putting these pieces of tape on my on my tripod so that I don't have to worry about them. Or not that I would be worrying, but you know. So one connection I can make is this one where I tape the two ends together and I roll it. Okay. And then I have a piece that bends. When I look at this, I can just kind of figure out how I'm going to make it. And I think that's the best thing to do. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep holding things close to me and then realizing they're not in the frame. So my apologies for that. So I'm holding this and I'm figuring out how I'm going to make this thing. I think I can do 3 together. If I go up, there, there, there. Ooh, I think I can put 5 together and make it work. So, tape. So, let's zoom in. So this is the same connection. I'm putting 2 skewers close to each other, and then I roll it back a little bit to pick up the tape, and then I roll it forward. And it makes this bendy connection. And my calculations say that I can probably put 5 of these together and then do the connections between them, and I think I'll try that. So right now I've got 4, and I'm going to add my 5th one, and then I'll show you the other connections. So I bring it back, and then forward. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit, and so now I've got this big bendy thing. And I think I'm going to be able to go like this and this, and then I'll just be missing one part here. That must be really hard to see in the camera. So what I'm going to need is a tab at each end. Remember, with these videos, stop them, start them, stop it, catch up to me, rewind, go back to earlier. So with this connection, I'm going to make a tab, a big long tab that goes off the end. So I put my skewer down, I roll it forward, and then I make a little fold here, and then I'm going to fold it forward. Okay, so there I've got this tab right here, and that's going to be able to wrap around something, and then I tape it. Okay, why don't I show you that, and then we'll go to the next part. So here I've got my tab, and it's going to wrap around and tape to this other part. Okay, let's turn the light down. I feel like you can't see it too well. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, so I'm going to get another piece of tape and taping this. Wrapping it around. This is the hard part when you're putting a tab on. For some reason it is so fiddly. So fiddly. Fiddly is the word of the day. Okay, so I've got my triangle, and then I'm going to attach this one up here. Okay, so this one's going to attach there. So I'm going to add another tab. And I like to have a nice long tab so that I can really I really have a lot to tape to something else. So I'm gonna zoom in. So I've got this stick and I roll it back so that the end of it catches on the skewer. And then I'm gonna make a little fold. And then as I roll, I'm going to fold. And the rest of my little sculpture is picking up and flopping around. So I'm gonna pick this up and I just fold it so that I've got this little tab here, okay? And then I see if I can stay in the frame. So I've got my tab and I'm wrapping it around the other part, which is, of course, always when I'm filming, things kind of fall apart. And that is art, people. That is art and that is life. I'm not going to worry about it too much in the interest of time. But if it starts falling apart, just squeeze it together. See if you can kind of mangle it into where it's supposed to be. Okay. And so I'm holding the tab and I'm putting the tape on. Okay. And again, it is tricky. But I think that once students get the hang of it, this is a great way to make a big, huge sculpture. So I'm gonna zoom out and I need one more piece here. So I'm gonna put tabs on this one last skewer, and I'm gonna go a little more quickly so that I don't make a video that is 4 hours long. So I'm certainly capable of that. One thing that I find I am missing quite a bit with teaching this class online is just talking to students. And I think it's mainly that while my students are working, I talk to them. I walk around and I do rounds, just like doctors do, and I talk to you about how things are going. But I also kind of look around the room and see what I think people need to hear. And so you just kind of have, it's kind of like a yoga class where I'm just kind of talking everybody through whatever it is that they're doing. So here are my tabs, and I'm going to put those along. You know, for all I know, my yoga voice has always been confusing to people. So people might really enjoy not having to listen to me. But we'll see. We'll see. This is a grand experiment. So I've wrapped the tab around, and I'm taking the tape and wrapping the tape around. This is getting a little messy. That's okay. It's good if it doesn't look perfect because it's tricky. But the thing is that once you get the hang of it, it really goes very quickly. And I have not found another method that allows us to make big sculptures as quickly as this does. Now I know that people are limited in terms of the space that you're using at home. So definitely if you don't want to make something enormous, you certainly don't have to. But it is fun to have some kind of, I mean, this sculpture with the skewers and the tissue paper, it's about $5, you know, at the most. So here's your little pyramid, okay? It's all put together. Now, we're going to add the tissue paper. And I like to do this part on a cardboard surface so that I don't get my mat all dirty. And I just have, let's see, I might need to, got some weird shadows today in my filming. My apologies for that. Okay, so I'm gonna glue 2 parts at a time so it doesn't get too unruly. And I've got separate videos that show you some of these aspects individually so that you don't have to skim through the whole video every time you need a little refresher course. But I'm gonna glue one side and another side, and then I'm gonna let it dry, and then I'm gonna do the third side. So what I've got here is I've got a little bit of glue in a cup that I can put a cover on so that my glue doesn't dry. I also have a paintbrush with some water because you don't want the glue to dry on your paintbrush. So a nice wet brush is going to be perfect. And I'm going to put the glue on my brush so it's a little bit more liquidy than glue is when it comes out of the container. Not a whole lot. Let's see. There it is. So I'm just kind of mixing some of the glue on the side, and then I'm going to paint the glue onto 2 sides. Okay, so putting glue here, and then I'm going to put it on. So this is the first side that the tissue paper is going to stick to. I don't need a ton of glue. It doesn't need to be dripping in glue. So I think I'll put it here and here. And if you put glue somewhere that you didn't want it to be, don't worry too much, because you're not putting a whole lot of glue on. And so it can just dry, and then you can put the glue there when it's supposed to be there. There are lots of ways in which this little project can go very, very wrong, and it's good to do that on a smaller little object than on a big thing that you care about a lot. So let's see, so I've got my glue here and it's falling apart. This is real. I remember there were a few people who said one of the first things made it look so easy, and so now I'm going to make it look really, really hard. Okay, so I'm adhering this down, just putting it down, and you're noticing that I'm not cutting the paper first. I want it to be just flat on the, I don't need to cut it first, then it ends up being too small. Much easier to cut it afterwards. So I make sure that everything's stuck there, and then I fold it this way. And then, so then I have it attached to 2 sides. And ideally I just let it sit there, okay? I just let it sit there and dry. But one thing I am going to do, just in the interest of time, is I am going to cut off the excess paper, okay? Just so you can see how that works. So it's much easier to do this if it's dry. But I'm going to cut so that there's just about 1/4 of an inch to a half an inch of paper all the way around. And tissue paper is very easy to cut, but sometimes it snags. Let's see if I can get it to snag so that you can see. So it's easy to cut, but sometimes it snags. If you hold your knife up like that, it might snag. So let's see. So if it snags, just put it down and unsnag it. Don't worry too much. Okay. Ooh, no, wider. And the great thing about tissue paper is that it's very cheap. So if you screw something up, you can just tear it off and put another piece on in its stead. Okay. Okay, so you'd have something like this. Oops, sorry. Have something like this. And I would let it dry and then do what I'm going to do right next. So I have some little parts that are kind of bothering me. So I'm going to take those off. And then I'm going to have a little piece of plastic for the next part. This is just a piece of shrink wrap. And so I've got my water and my glue again. I'm dipping the brush in the water and get some nice watery glue. I want to avoid the gloppy glue, okay? And I've just got enough. And I'm going to put, let's see, if I hold it there, I'm going to put glue all along the edge here so that I can fold it over. Okay, and then on this edge, oops, there's the glue. And I'm going to glue it right off onto the plastic, and that'll ensure that I get a nice even bit of glue on. And then I'm just going to take, so the brush doesn't have as much glue on it anymore, and I'm going to take it and use it to wrap the paper around the skewers. Okay. Now, don't expect that you're going to be able to, not able to keep up with me, but I am speeding this process up after practicing it a number of times, okay? So I fully expect that you're going to need to stop this video and start it, rewind a bit, review things, let out a few swears when things don't go as you want them to do. Okay, and then I'm going to set this aside. It's going to be very hard to work with if it's wet and I'm trying to adhere more paper to it. It can really kind of go wrong and everything can get stuck to each other. So this is going to be set aside. Where shall I set it aside? Let's put it right. Ooh, perfect. You can't see where it's sitting perfectly, but it is perfect. I will just pretend. I will just pretend that that's true. Okay, so pretend that it is dried. Okay, this is one that I had at a similar stage. So, we're almost done. I'm just going to paint this side with glue and then put the paper on, and then we'll be ready to go. We'll be done with our activity. And ideally, this little activity can be used in your larger sculpture, okay? And I think that would be cool if it was. So, I'm putting glue on this last side. Sometimes the other tissue paper is sticking up, or the tape is sticking up in a way that might catch the tissue paper. So yeah, we just kind of watch for that and try to have that not happen. You do get gluey fingers. Let's see. Okay, so then we've got our mess here, and I just have my paper here, and I'm going to put this down and stretch my paper just a little bit. So I put a corner down and stretch to the other corner. And then I mean, you can't even see me pulling. It's pulling the smallest amount you could ever pull. And then I've got this down exactly the way I want it. Okay? And sometimes the paper just gets very unruly, so I'm going to cut off a big part because it just feels very unruly as I'm trying to make this happen. And then I'm going to cut off the edge, just like I did before, leaving about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch. Just so that it will wrap around the skewer. Sometimes I leave a little bit less material at the edge so that you can see how that's working. Okay, a little less material at the edge, and then make sure my glue isn't too gloppy, and I get my plastic. I like to be very specific in my process, especially when I am doing a demo. But that doesn't mean, I mean, you want to try to be specific in your process because that will get you a more precise outcome. But I'm not expecting anybody to be perfect, including myself. I always say to my students, aim for precision, but continually forgive yourself for not getting there, okay? That is a rule. Okay, so I'm putting this down and I'm putting my glue out to the edges. This is the same piece of saran wrap that I had before. The glue is kind of drying on it, so I just reuse it. Okay, so we have got a very sticky piece of paper there. I'm going to hold it up, maybe in where the camera can actually see it. Ooh, it feels like it's going to fall. Okay, and then I'm going to just press this around and press it down here. Just painting it down. And I think when you're doing this little test, it's easy to see all the problems. I do too. I look at what I'm doing and I think, oh my gosh, look at that bump, look at that wrinkle, that's just the worst. But then, you know, if somebody else walks in and takes a look at it, they'll say, oh, how'd you do that? That looks really good. So be kind to yourself. Your critical voice, it's important because it drives you to be better every time you try something. But you can't let it stop you in your tracks. You just can't. Even if it's very loud. Okay? So this is it. And that is your project. That's your activity. And then you're going to take photos of it and put it on the discussion board. Make sure to wash off your brush. I do not take good care of my brushes. Sometimes I leave them in water for weeks. It's a very bad habit, but at least rinse it off in the water, put it aside, and then your glue and your cup, you're probably going to use it again, so use a cup that has a lid. Perfect. The end.